name is Pat, and I'm an alcoholic, and grateful to be sober. I'm grateful to be here, and welcome to Zoom. You know what I mean? It's so weird. You know, it's like, man, it's like, oh man, I'm a chronic malcontent. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm in the meetings, right, it's like, oh, I gotta drive 30 miles to the meeting, and oh my God, chapter 5, and she or he's going to share again. And oh my God, the personalities and blah, 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 blah. And then you take the meeting away and you go to Zoom and I'm like, oh wait, I want the meeting back. Oh man, the Zoom, man, we're not connecting and geez, it's not the same. And we go through that process. And like what I come to like realize is the power of God through the servants of Alcoholics Anonymous and how fast the servants of Alcoholics Anonymous mobilize. Zoom connected, you know what I mean? And I'm just forever grateful for those that continue to show up to Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to thank Teresa. I forgot who asked me to talk, and I apologize, but thank you for letting me participate in my recovery. And the topic is or the power of God in the here and now. And it's I'm just like everyone else in the world, I'm just overwhelmed with tons of emotions and sadness. And Saturday, I stood at 3rd and Fairfax in Los Angeles with my brothers and sisters, and I had to do some inventory today, and I had sat with my therapist and did some work, and I'm just like exhausted. My body shut down completely, 100% emotionally, mentally, and physically. I took a nap, and I set the alarm to make sure that I could get up and have ample time to get centered with God and to get into some meditation so that I could bring the power of God into this talk. And right when I woke up, my 13-year-old son had sent me a text that said, "Dad, can you talk?" And I was sleeping, and then it said, "Hey," and I called him, and he's experiencing a lot of anxiety and a lot of sadness and a lot of hurt and a lot of what's going on and not understanding. And so for 30 minutes, I sat with him and brought God into his life, his relationship with God into his life. And we talked about God. And then I'm like, oh my God, was I like, you know what I mean? Because it's Zoom, are you supposed to wear a tie? Not supposed to wear a tie? Is this a meeting that is structured or not structured? And then I'm like, zing, you know what I mean? And then I'm like, oh my God, what would my sponsor do? Okay, make me wear a tie. It doesn't matter. Put it on, and then I sit in with you guys and we read the preamble, and all of a sudden I just take that deep breath when I know that I'm amongst people that understand the insanity that can go on in this mind, and I'm super grateful that I have the opportunity to be here with you. My sobriety date's October 23rd, 2002. I have a sponsor. His name's Mike Socchio, and I have a home group, and my home group's the South Coast Speakers Meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We meet on a Wednesday night in Laguna Beach when we can physically meet, and now we meet at Zoom at 7, which is weird to say, but that's, and I love my home group. My home group, our first meeting was in February 1946. And there's a lot of history in my home group. And I remember when I walked up to my home group, I was met by a man by the name of John Ackerland, and he had 40 something years at the time. And I remember him putting out his hand, and he said, "Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous, kid." He didn't care where I had been, who I had done it with. Was I an alcoholic? Was I not an alcoholic? What I had done. All he said was, "Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous." And he brought me into the middle of the meeting, and it seemed like there was 5,000 people. There was really only about 175, but it seemed like about 5,000 people. And he took me in the second row on the right-hand side, and he sat me in the middle of giants, and guys like Lynn Wilder and Frank O'Rourke and Tommy Whalen and men with a lot of sobriety, a lot of pillars in our community. And he sat me in the middle of them, and they just told me their stories. They sat and they told me their story. And I'm so grateful that Alcoholics Anonymous is a storytelling society. We come here and we tell our story, and something happens spiritually. Fellowship of the Spirit. Something happened internally in me in that moment when they started telling me their stories, And then the meeting started, and they were real structured and they were real serious, you know, and I got like anxiety, and I'm like vibrating. I had like 0 hours, you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, you know what I mean? And I remember John putting his hand on my leg, and he'd say, "Don't forget to breathe, kid." You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, breathe. Here and now, you know, breathe in God, breathe out fear, you know, and I'm like, whoa, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden she like started walking across, and I'm like, I got to go to the bathroom, you know what I mean? And John's like, no, put his hand on my leg. He said, we don't go to the bathroom during the meeting. You go before and you go after, you know? And then the next week I showed up, and I'm a firm believer that my character defects kept me doing what you wanted me to do because I wanted John to like me. And I remember running up to John, and I sat next to him, and I wanted to hear those stories from those old timers, you know, because I felt safe there. You know, I felt safe. And the girl came up and she said, we want you to read the 12 traditions. And John's like, he's not reading the 12 traditions, you know, and my feeling was hurt, you know what I mean? And I looked at him, and he said, yeah, you're not dressed appropriately to be behind the podium. Next week, show up with a collared shirt. Maybe we can get you up there. And next week I showed up with a collared shirt, and then they didn't ask me to read. And then I was resentful they didn't ask me to read, you know, and I remember after the meeting, I was like, John, I'm having a hard time sleeping, you know, and I was waiting for him to tell me, you know, go home and read the big book. That'll put you to sleep, you know, because I had heard other people say that, you know. And he took me over the literature table, and he gave me a book, Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, you know what I mean? And he said, the history will put you to sleep, kid, you know, and I didn't have any idea what he meant. And I remember going home that night, I read like half a page, and I was like sleeping, you know what I mean? And I was like, man, that guy's a genius, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, but what I'll never forget is the unconditional love that man showed me, you know? When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I hadn't showered in 6 months. I was up for 21 days. I had 2 shoes, only one had a sole. I'd been living on Skid Row for 1.5 years. As a straight man, I'd walk into a gay bar and I'd flirt with enough men to get enough alcohol in my body and hope that I would make it out before I blacked out. And sometimes I would, and sometimes I wouldn't. And when I came to on October 23rd, 2002, I was laying in bed with a dude. I had no clue who he was, but knew what I did the night before in order to get what I need to get. And I was filled with that shame, and I was filled with that guilt. I was filled with that isolation and that loneliness. I just hated myself, you know? And it wasn't the first time, you know, that had happened. It was a daily routine for me. I'd come out of a motel. I was sexually assaulted by 3 men. I came out of a hotel, and I remember I didn't know if it was 5:30 in the morning. I know it was 5:30 in the afternoon, and I know that if I can just get to the liquor store and get a pint of tequila, everything would be all right. And I would get to the liquor store, and it was obviously 5:30 in the morning because there was other people waiting outside to get in, and we'd sit there outside and make that promise, and I'd make those solemn oaths that this time was going to be different. You know what I mean? And I remember that there's 2 locks on the door, and I remember I'm opening the first lock, and I remember opening that second lock, and that door kind of just opening just a little bit, like the air just push it. And I would get that sense of ease and comfort, just knowing that I was going in. And I remember going in and getting that pint of tequila and twisting the cap and tossing it and drinking half of that pint down. And I get the same feeling that I got when I was sitting with you when I heard the preamble, and something inside of me would click, and I'd be back down the street. And maybe it was a day, maybe it was 2 weeks, maybe it was a month, but I'd be back at that motel knocking on that same door that I just got sexually assaulted out of, knocking, begging to get back in. And they let me back in, and the same thing would happen day in and day out. And I'd go to that same liquor store, and I'd make that promise, this time it's going to be different. And I didn't know what alcoholism was. I didn't know that I suffered from a spiritual malady. I didn't know that when I put alcohol into my body, I couldn't stop. I didn't know that I had a mind that always drove me back to alcohol. And every time I would go to Alcoholics Anonymous, they would ask if there was any newcomers, and I'd raise my hand and I'd say, my name is Pat and I'm an addict. And people would look at me and just like, you're not supposed to be here, you're an addict. And I'd leave AA and I'd go out there and I'd die. And no one ever followed me out and said, kid, here's a big book, take this thing home or to your bush or where you're living. Maybe you might identify, you know? And I go out there and I die and I come back and I wouldn't identify because I didn't want the judgment from Alcoholics Anonymous. And And then I would come back and I'd say, my name is Pat, I'm an alcoholic and an addict. And then they, ha, 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 put $2 in the basket, you know, and I leave AA. And when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous on October 23rd, I was absolutely broken, you know, and I came to with that shame and that guilt and that same mind that knew if I could get to the liquor store, that same obsession that was just driving. And what happened in that obsession on that day was I had a spiritual defense. I didn't believe in God until I was 10 years sober. But I had a spiritual defense that walked right in between me and that first drink. And that spiritual defense said, call your mom and ask for help. And at that time, I was 27 years old. My mom had 26 years sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I called my mom and I said, Mom, I need help. And she said, I can't help you anymore. She had gone to Al-Anon and the gig was up, you know what I mean? And she said, I can't help you anymore. Stay where you are and someone from AA will come and get you. And these two guys from AA came. And AA wasn't attractive that day, but this dude was on fire for AA. You know the guy on fire for AA? He came in. He didn't even knock. He like barged right in the door. He goes, my name's Jack. I'm an alcoholic. And my mom was like, whoa, vibrating. And this other guy was on a walker. He's like, my name's John. I got 90 days sober. You know what I mean? And I'm like, oh my God, this is where I can't, what it's all come down to. These guys, you know, because I got a case builder. I got to build a case to keep you at an arm's distance, you know? I got a case builder that's telling me my case is different. I'm different. I'm not like you. And that brain is going, you know what I mean? And I know that brain is going to protect me from being hurt, you know, but I didn't know that at the time. But the grace of God entered my life that day because I never met my dad. My mom got pregnant in a blackout, so I'll never know who my dad is. I was sexually assaulted 12 times by that day when I made that call. I never trusted men. And that guy said to me that day, he said, come with me, kid. And I got off the bed and I followed that guy at that motel. And I got downstairs and I got to the van. He said, kid, he said, don't worry. If you had to throw up, don't worry. Just throw up on the floor. It's a 12-step van. You know what I mean? I was like, whoa, okay, 12-step van. You know what I mean? And these guys told me their stories, you know? They talked about drinking and going to the hospital and drinking and going to the hospital and drinking and going to the hospital and drinking and going to the hospital. I didn't identify. And I started to build a case and I started to say my case is different. He said, what happens to you when you drink, Pat? I said, well, when I drink, I go to jail. And none of them laughed, but he introduced me to a guy named Pete when I got to Charlie Street in Costa Mesa, and Pete came over and Pete said, man, when I drink, I go to jail. And inside of me, I laughed. Inside of me, I connected to that guy telling me his story. When he told me when he drank, he went to jail, there was a connection that occurred. There was an identification that occurred. And I started to go, oh my God, when I drink, because see, alcohol was never my problem. This drug was my problem. That drug was my problem. This drug, that drug, this drug, that drug. Alcohol was never a problem. And I'd crawl out of that motel and I'd say, just don't do that drug and you'd be all right. And I'd go get a pint of tequila and I'm back doing that and I'm back doing that. And I'm back in the same situation time in and time out. And he started talking about his drinking. And I started to realize that every morning I'd go to that liquor store and I'd crawl out of that motel and I'd get a pint of tequila every time. And something inside of me would click. And they didn't talk about a phenomenon of craving or an allergy. They didn't talk about that. They just told me their stories. And I remember Jack coming over. He said, Pat, why do you pick back up? I said, I have no idea why I pick back up. I have no idea. I never want to end up in these situations. I have no idea. And then Jack started talking to me about the thinking that preceded his first drink. He talked about every time he was in the hospital, he would have a thought this time was going to be different. If I could just do X, Y, and Z and get the master plan, then everything will be all right. And then I take a drink and then I'm doing some drugs and then I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm back in the hospital and I'm dying of alcoholism and I have a mind that tells me that this time is going to be different. And I remember looking at him and he said, Pat, if you could concede both propositions, physical and mental, he said, you might be alcoholic. And I'm grateful that he didn't tell me that I was an alcoholic. What he said was, he said, you might be alcoholic. And that left me with no defense. I looked at him and I said, Jack, I said, I'm alcoholic. And he started talking about the singleness of purpose and the things and that what we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous is related to alcohol. And that was on day one on October 23rd, sitting in Charlie Street. And he looked at me and he said, do you believe in God? I said, absolutely not. I'll never believe in God. He said, do you believe that Alcoholics Anonymous worked for me? And he was telling me his story for a couple hours. And I looked at him and I said, I think Alcoholics Anonymous has worked for you. And he said, that's all that you need. It's just a little bit of willingness, a little bit of belief in something other than what you have going on. I made a decision to do what he told me to do on day one. That was my third step. I made a decision to do what Jack told me to do. And he looked at me and he said, kid, I want you to take a shower. And I thought, man, how did he know? It had only been 6 months, but I didn't know that he knew. And I remember going to the shower, and I remember turning the water on. I remember falling down in that motel that day, and I started to cry. I don't know how long I was there, if I was there an hour, 30 minutes, what. But that guy walked in that day, that detox, man, that dirty floor, and that man got on the floor with me, and he held me down there. He held me. He said, I love you, kid. He said, it's going to be all right, kid. It's going to be all right. And something inside of me shifted, man. Something I know spiritually shifted in me. And I remember just turning and looking at him. I remember looking into his eyes, and he looked right into my soul, and he said, kid, I love you. He said, I want you to stand up. And I stood up, and he took off my shirt, and he walked me into the shower, and he held on to me. And the man took a washcloth, he took a bar of soap, and the man scrubbed my back. I had never felt love from another human being until that time. I was 27 years old. For the first time in my life, I felt love from another human being. And that's the unconditional love that I feel in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the unconditional love that when I sit knee to knee and read the book, when I walk into the room, when I hear the music of Alcoholics Anonymous, the laughter and the camaraderie, right? That unconditional love that we have for one another, the unconditional love that will go to the end of the earth for one another, and that's what I was given on day one. And I went through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I was already making amends at 90 days, and I made amends to my mom, and she said, all I want you to do is I want you to get in the middle of AA and help people. And I had to pay the money back. Jack made me pay the money back. He made me write a note to my mom, $25 a week, write the notes. And I did that. And I was writing the notes, and I was giving her the money. 5 years. She said, I don't want the money anymore, but I still want the notes. And so I still wrote the notes, and I got busy in AA. And, they said, I got on service committees, and I got service commitments at my meetings. I started sponsoring guys right away, and I got busy in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I got into a relationship, and she got pregnant, and my son was born, and my son came out, and I looked right into the eyes of God. Though I did not believe in God, it was like a chisel that knocked the ice off my heart. And I was terrified. I never met my dad. How am I going to be a father? And I'm so grateful for the women, because I would come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you guys would share the pain of your child's father not paying the child support. And through your pain, I learned how to be financially responsible for my kid. Through your pain of expressing how the father of your child didn't show up for visitation, I learned how to show up for my son. And through your pain, I learned how to be a good father. And I'm forever grateful for the women in Alcoholics Anonymous. But I didn't know that I can love another human being. I didn't know that I could get to that space. And for the first 6 months of my kid's life, I held on to my kid, and I took care of him every day. I was a student, and I had my sponsee over there, and I would call the women, because you'd get the hiccups, and you guys would tell me what to do. You'd say, what do you do when you have the hiccups? I'm like, wait. They're like, yeah, perfect, hang up. And then I would wait, and it would go away. And my kid would cry, and I put him on my head, and he wouldn't cry up there. So we walked around all the time with my kid on my head. And one day I was at my house, and I stood up, and I put my son on my head, and I put my son's head right into a ceiling fan. It was like, whack, 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 And I went, oh my God. And my sponsee grabbed my kid, and I went to the back room, and I got on my knees, and I prayed to a God I didn't believe in. Because the old timers in Alcoholics Anonymous told me, we don't care if you believe or not, pray anyways. And because I wanted the old timers to like me, I went, and every day, and I prayed. And my prayers for 8 years were, God, I don't believe that you exist. But the old timers tell me that if I pray to you, maybe one day I'll have a relationship with you. I don't know what to do. I just put my son's head in the ceiling fan. Please help me. And I heard a voice in the closet, and I thought I was tripping. Flashback, LSD flashback. It was like, you need to call the doctor. You know what I mean? I was like, whoa. You know what I mean? I remember calling the doctor, and the doctor told me what to do. And I grabbed my kid, and I was holding on to my kid, so scared that I killed my kid, And I'm looking at my kid, and he didn't have anything wrong with him. There was no dilated eyes or whatever happens there. He had a little bump on his head from the fan, a little bruise. But what happened for me was I cared more about another human being than I cared about myself. selfish and self-centered, walked in that door on 10/23/02. What you guys have given me, a little bit, each day a little bit, spoon-fed me to care for another human being. The most closest to God I am is when I'm sitting with one of you, reading the book, being a service with you. And it was started to shift, right? This relationship with God started to shift. But what happened for me was I'm terrified, right? I want you to love me so bad, but I'm like, arm's distance. Love me so bad, arm's distance. And when you're living like that and you don't believe in God, my behavior is absolutely horrendous in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I ended up cheating on my son's mom, and I got in another relationship, and I ended up cheating on her, and I got in another relationship, and I cheated on her. And at 8 years of sobriety, I was driving my car 100 miles an hour down the road because one more relationship broke. And because I don't like this kind of behavior, I go home every night and want to kill myself. But what you tell me in Alcoholics Anonymous, you say, get out of self, help others, right? The book says at the purest urge, help others. And I'm helping and I'm helping and I'm helping, and it's not working. I don't want to live like this, and I don't know a way out. And I don't know that it's because I don't believe in God. And I'm driving my car 100 miles an hour down the road, and I hear a voice in the back seat that says, call that guy Jonathan from your Tuesday night meeting before you kill yourself. And I was 8.5 years sober. I sponsored way too many people. I was speaking. I was busy activity, busy. And it was midnight, and this guy's a lot older than me, lived 30 miles north of me, and he picked up the phone, and he answered the phone in one ring. He said, Pat, and I was crying. I'm going to kill myself. I can't do it anymore. And he said, Pat, I've been waiting for this call for a year. See, this man talked about untreated alcoholism in my Tuesday night meeting, and I was always attracted, but I didn't know that that was the problem. And I said, I'll meet you at Denny's. He said, oh, no, I'm going to stay on the phone till you get there, because he knew I wasn't going to show up. You know what I'm saying? And he stood on the phone with me until I pulled into Denny's. And I remember walking into Denny's, and he opened the book to page 52. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. I'm bawling, snot's going everywhere. Prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be a real help to other people. And he said, what I want you to write at the end of that paragraph is that you have an insane sex life. And I was like, well, that's kind of brutal, you know? And I'm sitting here crying, this girl broke up with me, blah, blah, blah. And he looked at me and he said, son, he said, what you're suffering from is untreated alcoholism. And he told me at 17 years he was going to kill himself. And he reached out to a man by the name of Luther Wood. And Luther Wood was suicidal, and he had reached out to a man by the name of Clint Hodges. And Clint Hodges was going to kill himself and reached out to a man by the name of Don Pritz. And I knew on the inside that I was going to be all right if I followed this guy's direction. That man that night carried a message of depth and weight. He didn't say to me, you're right where you're supposed to be, kid. He didn't say to me in one of them one-liners like, well, God, no, nothing happens in God's world by mistake, kid. What he did was he shared with me his experience. And we went through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had to look at my prejudices towards God. I hated God. He said, kid, I don't want you to get rid of the prejudice. He said, what I want you to do is I want you to set it aside. And I want you to ask yourself deep down within, what is it that you believe? And I started to do this assignment, and I came to believe that God was love. I came to believe that God was this intuition. I had this intuition my whole life. The intuition always said, Pat, go left, and I went right. The intuition said, go right, and I went left. I always avoided God's truth within me. And I remember going to him, and I had to write a vision of sanity of what that looked like in my life, which was really weird. You know what I mean? And then I had to write a list of the things that were blocking me from having a better relationship with God. And there were 7 things on the list, but the one thing that was blocking me was what you guys in Alcoholics Anonymous thought of me. My image in Alcoholics Anonymous as being whatever sponsor, with being a speaker guy, with being whatever it was the thing that was more important. And I had to say this prayer, God, please take me to a place where none of these things are as important as a relationship with you. And I was suicidal from 8.5 years till I was 10 years sober. And I don't mean like I think I'm going to kill myself. I would be up for 7 days at a time. I'd call my sponsor at the end of the cliff. I'm going to jump off. I'm done. I can't do this, you know? And I remember crossing off that last one of what you guys thought of me in Alcoholics Anonymous. And in the big book, it says, in the last analysis, that's where God is found. And in that last moment of analyzing every little thing in my life that blocked me from God, that I stood at a place where nothing was as important to me as my relationship with God. I called my sponsor in the morning. I said, I'm ready to make this third step decision. And I sat down with my sponsor, and I remember him saying a personal prayer. I remember him saying to God, I'm putting Pat's hand in your hand. And I made that decision with God. And I went through an inventory process, and I was suicidal. And I would call my sponsor, and he'd say, meet me at the meeting before you kill yourself. And I was like, oh man. So I'd meet him at the meeting, and then he would say, you know, whatever he would say. And then I'd feel a little better. And then he'd say, how's it amends to your dad coming along? And I'm like, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it. And I would call him, I'm going to kill myself. And he'd say, meet me at the meeting. I'd like to say goodbye to you before you kill yourself. And I'd meet him at the meeting. And one night, about a year into it, I knew, man, if you call this guy, he's going to tell you to meet him at the meeting. You're not going to be able to pull off your deal. So don't call him, you know. And so I pull over on the bridge of the 57 bridge here in Orange County. And I pull over and I get off the bridge and I go, God, I said, you got 10 seconds because I'm jumping off this bridge. I ain't calling that goofy dude from AA. I'm not calling no one from AA. It's me. You got 10 seconds. And I got out of the car and I got to the driver's front seat, front headlight, and my phone rang. And I looked at my phone, and it was an unknown number. It was 7 o'clock at night on a Friday. I don't answer unknown numbers. Might be someone that's looking for me. And I don't answer it. But that day I answered it. I don't know why I did, but I know why now. But I didn't know then. All of a sudden I pushed talk, and then I went, oh wait, what am I doing? And I go, hello. Now I'm on the end of the bridge, gonna jump off, and I go, hello. And this kid goes, is this Pat? I go, yeah, it's Pat Ochoa. He goes, my name is Chris. I met you at an AA meeting. And I'm calling to say thank you. But I'm also calling you to say goodbye because I'm leaving Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm going to go get loaded. And I said, oh, no, Chris, we don't drink one day at a time here in Alcoholics Anonymous. I started to talk about my thinking that always drove me back to that first drink. On the end of the bridge, I'm telling him all this thinking and that thinking, and then I'd pick up, and then I'd end up in jail. And then I looked at my watch. I realized there's a meeting starting in 30 minutes. I said, Chris, there's a meeting starting at the Candy Club. You want to meet me there? He said, yeah, I'll meet you there. And so I got in my car and I drove 30 miles south to walk into the Candy Club. And I walked there, and there's Chris. And Chris, like, oh my God, nice to see you. He said, will you be my sponsor? And I'm thinking, man, I was just about to kill myself, but I'd love to be your sponsor, Chris. You know what I mean? And I went home that night. And I'm screaming at God, F you, God, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. And I felt this hand that pushed me off the couch onto the floor. I was in the fetal position screaming, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. And I started to make amends to a man I never met. I don't have a part in the relationship with my father. My mom got pregnant in a blackout. But where had I been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and afraid? In every area of my life. If I only had a dad, I'd know how to be a boyfriend to you. If I only had a dad, I'd know how to be a friend to you. If I only had a dad, I'd know how to show up for work. If I only had a dad, I'd know how to live life. If I only, excuse after excuse after excuse. And what happened for me was the victim was pulled right out of me, and the power of love went deep down within this physical body. When I made that final amends to my father, the power of God went deep down within. And I remember going to my bedroom that night. Right after that, I went to my bedroom, and I hadn't slept in 7 days. I was 130 pounds. I was 40 pounds lighter than I am now. I walked in my bedroom and I fell asleep just like that. Just like that. And I haven't had to act in that behavior since I was 8.5 years sober till I stand here today. And I caught fire for this thing. What happened for me when I made amends to my mom, and my mom was an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. My mom rocked an oxygen tank like nobody's business. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't know, one whole lung was scar tissued out from smoking. She was operating on 30% of one lung for the last 3 years of her life. And I'd go every Monday to see my mom and to go to dinner with my son. And my mom was like hugging a cactus. You know what I mean? It was like, and I want her to love me the way she should love me. And she's not loving me. And I bite my nails and she'd stop biting your nails. And I'm like, got a bouncy leg. I got that, nervous disposition. You know what I mean? She's like, stop bouncing her leg, and she's got 40 years. And I'm thinking, you got 40 years. Like you should be, more spiritual than you are, and I remember telling my friend Michelle Lyon, I said, Michelle, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to dinner with her. She's not respecting me. Rah, 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 rah. And Michelle looked at me and she said, Pat, she's like, you're going to have to teach your mom how to love you. I'm, 40, man. My mom should be teaching me, the 5-year-old, right, how to love. And so I started grabbing my mom because I'm like super sensitive and lovey. And I grab her and I kiss her on the forehead. You know what I mean? She's like, oh, stop, and she'd get all like uncomfortable and I'd just love on her and I'd love on her and I'd love on her. And one time we were in Nebraska, we were speaking and I remember we were speaking at a conference together and we were walking through the airport and I'm an alcoholic, and she can't breathe and I'm like, Mom, just get in the wheelchair. I'm not getting that goddamn wheelchair. I'm like, just get in the wheelchair, Mom. It's going to be easier, that pride. I'm not getting in the wheelchair. Sure enough, I remember looking at, I don't know where the words came from, but I looked at her, I go, Mom, when are you going to let me love you? She sat in the wheelchair and I'm pushing my mom. And all of a sudden I got a bright idea, man. There's like a little hill and I just start running. I jump my feet up in the air and we're going like this. And she's like, stop, flipping me off. She's yelling at me, stop. And we got to the bottom and I'm laughing at her and she's just shaking her head. You know what I mean? And you can see like, I'm going to get you back, and I'm thinking, oh man. And what happened for us was our relationship changed. We turned to this innocent, childlike, fun-like relationship. And then I took a shower the next morning and I turned the water on. All this red water comes out. She had snuck in there and put a red dye tablet in the shower head. And she come out of the shower. She said, I got you back, and me and my mom's relationship changed. And my mom would show up to our home group at 5 o'clock for an 8 o'clock meeting to make sure everyone did it right. You know what I mean? And she'd pass a basket the first 5 rows to all my sponsees. They wouldn't put the money in, so she'd shame them for not putting the money in. Then she would flirt with them, and then the next week they'd show up and they'd be like, Patty, we got the money, and make sure that she saw them put it in the basket, and we had a fun time, And one night my mom went home. She thought she was gonna drown, and rushed her to the hospital. She had a tumor in her heart, and they diagnosed her with lung cancer. And I remember my mom calling me. She said, Pat, I'm going on hospice, but I'm only going on hospice to get off hospice. And I know it's the end, I don't want to believe it's the end. And she goes on hospice, and 2 weeks later, man, she's back at the home group. You know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, Mom, get him. And but that night she went home and the tumor had grown back in 2 weeks. And I went every day to see my mom, and I'd sit there. And my mom said to me one day, she goes, Patrick, she goes, don't sit here and watch me die. She said, go out there and live your life. Just come see me every day, but just go out there and live your life. And I go see my mom. I had to go speak in Seattle. And I didn't want to go. I didn't want to miss my mom's last breath. You guys always told me the greatest gift to Alcoholics Anonymous was you saw your loved one take their last breath, and I wanted that same experience. See, I wanted your experience. I never want my experience. I want someone else's experience. And I'm going to go speak in Seattle and be gone for 5 days, and I say a prayer, God, please, what do I do? And the message was loud and clear. You need to go be a service to Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't like that message, so I pray the next day, and same message, go be a service to, and I don't like that message, so I pray the next day, and finally I'm like, all right, I get it. So I go kiss my mom in the head. I said, I'll see you soon, and I left. And 3 days into that 5-day trip, I got a call. They said, your mom's unresponsive. She's not talking. She's unresponsive. You need to hurry up and get back and say goodbye to your mom. And I said a prayer, and the message was to stay and be a service to Alcoholics Anonymous. I called my sponsor, said, that's what you need to do. And it wasn't that easy when I was in it, but that's what happened. And I remember landed in Orange County, and I ran to see my mom, and I walked in the door, and my mom sat straight up, boom, with her arms up out like this. felt spirit walk in that room that day. And I went into my mom's arms and she held me and she said, Patto, I want you to know you did the right thing. She said, I love you. I love you. I love you. And that was the last words that my mom said. And my mom died on January 18th or January 10th, 2018, and my heart broke, you know. And the first promise in the big book talks about how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. The first promise, you know, I've recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. But if I don't maintain my relationship with God, that insanity of that first drink will come back. And I was walking 15 miles a day. My anxiety was through the roof. You know what I mean? Like I was like, you know, Teresa helped me with some stuff, and which I'm going to continue the process with. But I had to go into meditation. I had no other choice but to get down with spirit. And my friend said to me, he said, give yourself 5 minutes permission every day to get into breathing. That means you could be late to work 5 minutes. You can be late to AA 5 minutes. You can be late to anything you have going on to make sure you do those 5 minutes. And I started to do those 5 minutes, and my meditation changed, right? Where I do some writing. I write a love letter to myself every day. I read the Al-Anon meditation, and then I free write because I got some other issues. And then I free write on what I do. I look at some goals for the day, you know, and I write those out. I write a gratitude. So there's a lot of things that I do. But it's not about, see, I thought meditation was about having the perfect pillow, the perfect Buddha, the perfect incense. You know, I mean, it's not about that. What meditation is it's about the discipline. And what happens for me is that in meditation, in the quiet moments, when the thought comes, because I thought you're not supposed to think, you're supposed to just float around, you know? And so I breathe and I discontinue thought and I refocus on breath. And I breathe and I discontinue and I focus on breath. Not a big deal. I think it's got to be some crazy read of 5 books to find out. It's that simple. But what happens through the discipline is all of a sudden I'm through the day and I have a crazy thought and it says, discontinue thought, focus on moment, discontinue thought. And I'm like, whoa, all of a sudden. So the COVID hits, right? The COVID, oh my God, the COVID, it hits. And it's like 3 days in, like you read enough news, you're on social media. Next thing you know, man, I'm depressed. I mean, I'm going to kill myself on the couch 3 days into the deal. But I did the meditation in the morning. Dude, I was like floating during meditation. I'm in the moment, here and now. I mean, me and God are good. All of a sudden, an hour later, I'm on the couch, going to kill myself, depressed, COVID, the world's crashing. And I remember to get into thought, get into breathing, focus on breath, discontinue thought. And all of a sudden, the message came to me that I needed to be the love and the light, and that I have the ability to be of service. And the old timers in my group don't know how to set up Zoom, but yet I do. So I started setting up the Zoom and getting everything plugged in, and then sending it to my friends, Everyone's like, yeah, we're connected. And I feel good. I'm in the moment, right? The here and now, the closest I feel is when I'm of service to you. And I'm good for like 2 weeks and I'm doing the discipline. I'm in the game. Hey, it's all working, floating around. 2 weeks in though, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, we're going to die again. It's all crashing down. COVID's going to kill everyone. Oh my God. We've been locked down. We're going to be locked down for the rest of our lives. You know, worst case scenario. And and all of a sudden, focus on breath. Okay, get in the present, get in the here and now. So I'll get breathing, and then all of a sudden, I come to realize. I look back, my whole sobriety flashed before me. My whole sobriety. I went from Skid Row to making a 6-figure income. I was fired from that job. I was, worst case scenario, I was going to lose the house, I was going to lose the car, I was going to lose a relationship with my kid. But all of a sudden, another opportunity came. And God took care of everything. The rent was paid, the car was paid. I had a new opportunity. I built a business with some friends. All of a sudden, I had a better house, better car, better things. And then all of a sudden, I was pushed out of that partnership and pushed out of the 25%, nothing. No car, worst case scenario, everything's going to fall apart. I'm going to lose everything. I came to realize all of a sudden, like God had everything taken care of. This is on my couch in meditation. It's all flashing. And I got this attorney in AA. Oh man, be careful. And they helped me out. They were gonna settle the case for me for as a friend. And then the day my mom died, the attorney ripped me off for the settlement. And I realized that God was with me the whole time. The house was paid, the car payment was paid. But what I really came to realize was that I had a greater peace of mind. I had a greater amount of joy. I had a greater amount of happiness. My relationship with God was so much closer. But what I came to realize was that God was working the character out through all of those situations in my life to be the strong love and light that's within, for me to go out into this world in the darkest of times right now, to go out into the world to be the love and the light in other people's lives. I went over a minute, so I'm not going to tell that.
Did you mute yourself, Pat? I think you muted yourself.
Do I start at the beginning, Teresa? My name is Pat. I'm an alcoholic.
You gotta start all over. No.
Oh my gosh, I don't know where I muted myself, but I just love Alcoholics Anonymous. I went over 2 minutes. I was going to tell one more story, but I went over 2 minutes. But I absolutely love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love that you gave me the opportunity to participate with you guys. I don't know who I know in here. There's a lot of people in here. I saw Reggie in here, and Reggie White. I saw him. He's my brother, and I just love you guys. Thank you.